Rav, a great peace. Can you hear Ratzon? May it be God's will. It's been something of a week. Watching the news, watching protests, unrest, outrage, dissatisfaction, a discourse on refugee bans, on prioritizing Muslim over Christian refugees, on and on, round and round it goes. It seems to be the conversation that we as an American people are having right now. We even hear about it coming from the kids in our religious school, talking about it on break. It's filling in those spaces in that way. The thing is, we've got a lot of language about all of these things within our tradition. Here we find ourselves this week in Egypt, and so of course we have the famous "You shall not oppress the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt." In the Talmud, Bava Metzia, Rabbi Eliezer says that that particular formulation about not oppressing the stranger takes place 36 times in Torah, but who's counting? The American language for that, I have American language for that too. Is it, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." This is what's inscribed on the Statue of Liberty, in point of fact. Now here's the thing. All of that is one perspective on what it is we're seeing in the world today, but you could drash it another way. You could look at people's very real concerns about security. You could lift up this Jewish value of pikuach nefesh, of saving a life, as being the paramount thing to bring to our discourse right now. There are lots of ways of slicing it. It's hard for me to play in the realm personally of pikuach nefesh, though, given that we haven't had massive upswings of violence from refugees, from people who are fleeing the violence of other parts of the world. It's not to say it hasn't happened anywhere. We've seen real violence in Europe. It's a real thing. This is not to downplay very real concerns that people have. But I will say one thing that we, at least in the United States, have going for us is we don't come out of this ethos of the ethno-national European state. The state for all the French people because they are French and speak French and that's their birthright and who they are and their church and everything else. We have this ideal of a melting pot, actually. This is why we have that language on our Statue of Liberty. Liberty, no less. That's why we carry that language. That's why this is our discourse, is because that is an ideal that we hold. So I get that things are hard in Europe, and I also get where, at least I believe, we may be particularly well equipped to deal with the influx of people who are struggling to stay alive right now. So we have this imperative to take care of those who are in need from all of these texts, as well as this imperative to find security, find safety, save lives. But a lot of what I'm hearing, at least in this discourse right now over this week, it's a discourse of fear. There's a kind of reactivity around boundaries and borders and lines that we draw. Reminds me of when I was in high school. I was just sort of coming into my own political awareness of the world on September 11th, 2001. When I was 15, 16, 17, all of those years. And what was amazing was what came out of the fear of that moment. It was waterboarding. It was kinds of torture. It was other pieces that do not speak to our values as Americans. I mean, I think about what our new Secretary of Defense, James Mattis, said. He said, "I don't need torture. That's not in my toolkit. It doesn't even work. It's not what I want." He said, "Give me a pack of cigarettes and I'll get the truth out of these folks." So forget the efficacy of it. Putting that aside, it's not even within our values. But why did we torture people? I would make the argument it's not because we were malevolent, bad human beings. It's not like we were worse people in 2001 as an American people. We had a lot of fear. That was a moment that was so deeply inflected with the fear of the unknown, with a new moment in our society that we didn't totally know what to do with that. That was at least what I remember from that time, was that suddenly things were different after that. Fear. This week's Parsha, Bo, has something to tell us about it. Just even that title. There aren't many Parshiot I do this with, but this one, even just in the name of the Parsha, Bo. God says to Moses, Bo el Paro. Talk to Pharaoh. You usually see it translated as go to Pharaoh. But it doesn't exactly say that. Because it doesn't say lelechet. It doesn't say letzeit. It doesn't say go out, go forth. It says Bo. It says come into Pharaoh. Now, the thing is, Pharaoh's a lot of things for us. Pharaoh isn't just a guy. Pharaoh actually represents a lot of different things within the Israelite imagination, the rabbinic imagination. Pharaoh is a freighted thing for us. Pharaoh carries an awful lot. Here, Pharaoh is turning in and looking at these things which make us less free. The things within ourselves that cause us to be less free, to allow other people to be less free in this world. That's what this very first word, Bo, is about. It's about turning inward. It's about focusing on what are the things that stand in the way. And it's not just, it is, I want to say, a personal and individual thing, but it's also broader than that. The redemption for the Israelites from the oppression of Pharaoh was not an individual thing. That was a society-wide thing. It is up to society to Bo el Paro, to come in and see what is that pharaonic impulse that comes between us and freedom. Freedom for ourselves, freedom for other people. I think it is that fear, that anxiety, that hostility that is our Paro, our Pharaoh right now. It's what we're being called inward to look at in this particular moment in time. Now, that's not to say we shouldn't be afraid necessarily. I would be lying to you if I didn't have my own sense of trepidation about what will come in the weeks and the months and the years. It's a fraught moment we're in, I would suggest, and I would suggest a lot of that fear comes out of that. So it's not about pretending that there's nothing that's scary in the world. But it's about holding that. It's about turning to that with some kind of intentionality, some kind of agency, and ascertaining what it is for us as individuals and a society, what it is that we have to move aside in order to reach out to that kind of freedom. Rabbi Nachman is famous for having said, Kol ha'ulam kulo gesher tsar me'od va'ikar lo lefached klal. The whole world is a very narrow bridge. The main thing is not to be afraid. Now that usually gets translated as afraid at all. But that lefached klal, I want to suggest, is not to be afraid at all, but rather to let fear consume and overwhelm us in our own journeys and in our collective sense of who we are. Bo el Paro, this week's Parsha, is all about looking at what are the things that stand in the way between us and our own freedom as people, and what stands in the way of us bringing freedom to others. What are the things that give us that fear, that anxiety? What is that Paro that we have to turn inward to and come to before it is we're going to find some kind of broader liberation for ourselves as Jews, as Americans, as individuals, as communities together as this journey continues. Bo el Paro, an invitation for the journey ahead. Shabbat Shalom. We'll continue.